Back again for another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers, joined by the returning Justin Lowery. Kind enough to take time out of his Wednesday evening to talk a little bit about Monday Night Raw. We'll talk about SmackDown Live as well as some trending topics later, but we're starting with the Raw recap. And Justin, right off the bat, before we get into a breakdown of some of the biggest takeaways, I thought that Monday Night Raw really was terrific. I thought it was one of the better shows that they've had within the past few months. And truthfully, I thought that the main event was one that we're probably going to remember for at least the next several months as well. So I thought definitely deserving of an applause for Monday Night Raw. I thought it was really well done. And I think they accomplished a lot in terms of reestablishing some guys and some teams that needed it as well.
No, I agree. The main event was really awesome. As we talked earlier, the only thing that kind of sucked was the ending. That's the only thing I took away from it. But all in all, I think those guys had about a 25, 30-minute match. And I would love to see that, every week on Raw.
So, did you get the feeling this past week that maybe there was a change in terms of they wanted to make some guys more a part of the show? Because we saw the Revival get a big victory. We'll talk about that. We saw the Authors of Pain return after being MIA for about 2 months. And then they're also going some storylines with a guy like Mojo Rawley. So it seems like they're maybe not necessarily trying to make new stars, but at least reintroduce guys in more prominent roles on Monday night.
Maybe. I mean, it should start picking up a little bit after that WrestleMania lull, because SummerSlam is, about 2 months away, which is like the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. So they're going to start rolling on that. But it's good to see some of these fresher faces. I don't want to say young, but fresher faces get some, airtime, and maybe creatives finally figuring out, stuff to do with some of these guys instead of rehashing the same storylines, over and over again.
Well, the first thing that I thought of when I watched Raw and then when I watched SmackDown as well is there's a focus now on trying to maybe make some more credible tag teams. Because for a while, SmackDown had some great feuds with the Usos and the New Day, and then, of course, the Bludgeon Brothers inserted in that. But on Raw, the tag team division has been a mess for quite some time. And you had the Revival, in part because of some unfortunate injuries. They basically were a non-factor. Authors of Pain come up. They get introduced with a couple of squash matches. They're gone. Well, now all of a sudden you have a legitimate storyline for the tag team titles with the B team, albeit somewhat of a joke team, but they're getting over with the fans against Matt Hardy, Bray Wyatt. And then you have these two other teams that were big-time players in NXT looking like maybe finally they might be on the right track on Raw. So if they are putting an emphasis back on tag team wrestling, especially on Raw, which sorely needs it, that's great in my opinion, because I think that they have the talent to have a great tag team division on both shows.
No, I agree. I'm a fan of tag team wrestling. And when done right, tag matches can be great. WWE, pretty much for the most part over the last 10 years, have kind of ignored the tag team division. Every once in a while, they refocus some energy there. It might be good for 5 to 6 months, and then it tends to lose itself. It seems a tag team gets hot, and they immediately want to break up the tag team for no good reason. So I hope, it keeps going the way it's going, and we can see some great matches. I'm skeptical. I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, we talked about the main event. You mentioned it was almost 30 minutes. So let's focus now on that. It was Seth Rollins. He invoked his rematch clause after losing the Intercontinental title the prior week to Dolph Ziggler. And what I think was somewhat of a shocker with the role that Seth Rollins had been on, Ziggler was able to get him with a roll-up victory, win the title. So Rollins made the announcement, I'm cashing in my rematch clause for the following week. So we knew that match was going to take place on Raw. It was not a surprise. I think what was a surprise in a very pleasant way was the fact that they made that title match. Again, it is a secondary title, but on Raw it has a much bigger feeling because Brock Lesnar's not there to defend the Universal title. The IC title was the main event of Monday Night Raw, and they had, I believe it came to be over 28 minutes to put on a real clinic. Now, the only negative that we kind of mentioned briefly was the ending. It ended with a run-in with Drew McIntyre coming out, pulling out the official before Rollins seemingly was able to get the 3 count. But to me, this was another classic that Seth Rollins has been putting together week after week in 2018. I've made the argument that this was his best match of the year, and that's saying a lot with some of the great ones he's had with The Miz and Finn Balor, the Gauntlet match as well, and of course his most recent one with Elias just about 10 days ago now. But for Ziggler, it was even bigger than that, because Dolph Ziggler is a guy that I've always been a huge fan of. The talent has been there in the ring, but he's a guy that I think the audience just lost interest in because he never consistently had a top storyline. He would get a push, and it would last a few months, and then he would kind of be pushed to the side. And I've always told you, Justin, I think Dolph is one of the best guys when motivated and when given a good storyline. Since he's been with Drew McIntyre, he's had that. He showed how good he could be on Monday Night Raw, and really I thought those two created just a special main event.
No, I agree, and especially everything you said about Dolph there. I, like you, have been a big fan of his for many years. I mean, it's still hard for me at this point in time to really get behind him because, like you said, there's been so many stop and goes with him. You know, every time it looks like, you know, like the day after WrestleMania when he cashed in and became the heavyweight champion, they're like, oh, this is great. The crowd was so behind him. They were ready to see him take the next step. And within 2 months, it was done and over with. There's so many stop and goes with him that it's hard to feel anything for him anymore, at least from my point of view. And I found it interesting that he won the title out of nowhere. It was very unexpected, which I enjoy to be surprised because I think that's very hard to do in today's world with social media to surprise fans. So, like, and I saw actually today, because you know me, I do like to, you know, read the internet and the dirt sheets and stuff. There's a rumor out there that the reason he won it is because Vince wants him to re-sign with the company, and he has yet to do so. So they're trying to put him in a position where he wants to re-sign with the company.
I was just going to bring up very quickly, because I know we want to talk about some other stuff on Raw. Where does this go? Because to me, if you wanted to have Rollins drop the title and potentially go for bigger things, which truthfully I think he's the guy that should be challenging Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, that's certainly up in the air. I don't know how much of that is storyline with Brock or if he legitimately might not wrestle at SummerSlam. Nonetheless, Rollins would be a perfect guy for that, so you say, well, to move him up, he needs to drop the title. Elias would have been the more logical candidate to take that IC title. Seemed kind of bizarre with Ziggler because he was in the tag team. So do you expect that Ziggler has a sustained run, or does he drop the title potentially back to Seth Rollins at the upcoming pay-per-view and then go back to the tag team focus with Drew McIntyre? Because I don't think you want Drew McIntyre just to be a bodyguard at this point. He's too good in the ring.
Well, no, I think Drew has the higher ceiling. If one of the two gets the push, it should be Drew, not Dolph. That's what makes me believe that there is something to the story, that maybe they are trying to get him to re-sign, and that's why they got it. Because like you said, Elias would have been the perfect choice to take the title off of him. I mean, he's hot, and that would really give him the next step in his career. So why they chose not to do that and then go straight to Dolph is a little fishy to me. But I do believe Rollins should be the one facing Lesnar at SummerSlam. And by all accounts, it is this storyline, you know, that he is picked to, you know, defend the title at SummerSlam, which supposedly is going to be his last match. And
I hope.
I hope too. I can't stand it anymore. But I hope it is Rollins. I think we've touched, you know, upon this in previous episodes. Rollins should be the face of the company, not Roman. At least not right now. Rollins has done everything the number one star of the company should be doing, and I think he deserves a shot to run with it.
You mentioned Roman Reigns. Let's transition to Roman and what he did on Raw. The show began with Kurt Angle again highlighting the fact that Brock Lesnar seemingly will not be defending his title at SummerSlam. We'll see if that changes. But nonetheless, they were planning on having a multi-man, without giving any specifics, multi-man match at Extreme Rules in about 2 weeks to determine the number one contender. That's been scrapped. So now it looks like it's going to be Roman against Bobby Lashley, face versus face. But Kurt Angle, as he's apt to do now recently, decides to put those two together in a tag team because the Revival came out and interrupted the segment. And, of course, Constable Corbin also factored in that decision. But we had Roman Reigns, Bobby Lashley against the Revival. The big takeaway from this one, of course, was the miscommunication of Roman and Lashley tag team members not on the same page. And stunningly, the Revival not only won, but they won by getting a pinfall against Roman Reigns. This is the Revival team that we mentioned had not been featured for months at a time. If they had been on Raw, it was sort of in a comedic role. Not serious contenders, but all it takes is 1 week to get the momentum rolling. I hope that this is sustained for the Revival. Of course, it's going to lead to more stuff between Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns, but it's great to see this tag team, who was so impressive at NXT, maybe get a chance. And if you listen to the commentary, Corey Graves was legitimately excited that the Revival won, because I think a lot of wrestling fans said maybe this is finally the turning point for this team.
I hope it is, but I'll believe it when I see it. They can't go away from this win and then we not see them for the next 2 episodes of Raw, or they're in a backstage segment next week. They need, like you said, momentum. They need to do this week after week, because they've been kind of hurt and tarnished so bad over the last couple months. 1 week isn't just going to make it happen. They need to go 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row of consistently winning matches and looking good doing so, and not just squash matches. You have to have them defeat at least upper mid-card talent so the fans can actually take these guys serious.
There were some verbal jabs between Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns. Those guys, again, they're both faces, but it looks like they're going to square off potentially in Pittsburgh at Extreme Rules. What do you think of this feud? Because Lashley is a guy that's really struggled since his comeback in terms of his character, in terms of his mic skills. He's very solid in the ring, and he certainly can do stuff a lot of guys can't. Roman, I think you could kind of say, is in a similar situation. Roman typically goes out and has good matches, but the fans aren't behind him. We know that. And at times it just seems like he's spinning his wheels in terms of what he's looking to do with the storyline. So with Lesnar seemingly out of the picture, and these guys really, it started about them fighting over which one should challenge Lesnar. It looks like they're going to go at it.
Yeah. Lashley, I'm going to be honest, he bores me. Great, athletic, in-ring ability, but like you were saying, he has no charisma, he has no personality, he has no it factor, he can't cut a promo. He's a bigger version of Apollo Crews. I didn't care for Lashley in his first run in the mid 2000s. I didn't care for his TNA run. Great, in-ring guy, but he doesn't do anything for me. There's nothing there. He doesn't draw me in. And I'm interested in seeing the match, because with the way the crowd treats Roman, and I don't think the crowd really cares about Bobby Lashley, you might see another type of match where the crowd just craps on the whole match the entire way through.
You would think that those guys could have a pretty good match, though, right? I know sometimes if the fans aren't behind it, that's sort of lost. But I feel like, unlike Jinder and Roman, these two could have a pretty darn entertaining match.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's going to be entertaining, but that doesn't always matter now to the fans. And to be honest, Extreme Rules is in Pittsburgh, I believe, coming up. Those crowds can be 50-50. They're sometimes a little, snarkier than, other times. I mean, I think we were both in attendance at the Royal Rumble the year that the crowd just totally took over the pay-per-view with the Cena-Orton match and the Rumble itself. So, I mean, could the crowd turn on the match? Possible. I'm going to think it's going to be 50-50, though.
You mentioned the word turn on. We saw Bayley turn on Sasha Banks, and I know you have been on the side of Bayley turning heel, and I said, I don't think it's ever going to happen, Justin. It's not 100%, but man, did she look like she was turning heel, at least on how Monday Night Raw unfolded. Just brutally beating Sasha with really no provocation, because they were tag team partners. There was no real hiccups between those two in the match. Sasha gets pinned and then just gets destroyed by Bayley, and I thought that was one of the highlights of the night, and the crowd reaction certainly indicated as such.
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. To me, that was my highlight storyline. I mean, I loved it, and the crowd loved it. I mean, did you see the energy? Like, when was the last time you saw the crowd with that type of energy directed towards Bayley? NXT, her debut on the main roster, it was awesome. Bayley needed character development, and it adds another, edge to her that she wasn't. The whole baby face, like she was too baby face, and why wouldn't she finally snap after months and months of Sasha? Everyone thought she would be the one to turn heel because she's a natural heel. Bayley isn't, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she could do with it. It was a perfect. The post-match beatdown was absolutely brutal and perfect. It's what you would see Triple H do on a turn, or any of the male superstars. It was absolutely perfect. The only thing I didn't like, though, is backstage after Kurt Angle.
I'm completely with you.
Counseling, like, people turn on people all the time, and no one's ever gone to the person. You have to go to counseling. That just sounded stupid. And I don't want this to turn into some type of comedy thing, like, Team Hell No, which I'm sure we'll get to later.
Justin, that's exactly what I thought. I thought that factor backstage, all that means to me is we're going to have to wait and see what they do next week, because Bayley might not be a heel, and it might be her going to counseling, and it might create some comical segments. But if they ultimately are going to have her turn heel and have Sasha face, I think you could have just done what they did post-match and call it a night and move on and go from there. So this has me concerned that what we saw in the ring won't be the long-term resolution anyway.
Right. It looks like they're setting up for a SummerSlam match, so maybe they're trying to stretch it out just a couple more weeks before they fully...
Well, they've been stretching this out for what, like 9 months now?
But, the crowd was doing the yes chant. They absolutely loved the turn. Don't screw it up. Have Bayley be the vicious one. People loved it. Let us see it. Don't turn it into, I'm sorry, I apologize. Nobody wants to see that. Just keep it the way it was.
Final question on this. If they do Bayley as a heel, Sasha as a face, will the crowd buy that and react accordingly, or is Bayley going to be the one that's mostly getting the cheers here, and you sort of have the audience going opposite of what they're presented as?
Right. You're probably right. I think she would get the cheers. Look at all the cheers she got on Monday Night Raw. I don't know if they, thought that was going to happen, or they were surprised by that. People love Bayley, and people like, especially in today's wrestling, people like good turns, good storyline telling, because most, people understand how wrestling works. They saw that. Most people maybe didn't think it was going to happen. They enjoyed it. She probably is going to get cheered. And maybe after SummerSlam, maybe you do the double flip where somehow she becomes the face again and Sasha goes to the heel. There's countless ways you can go about doing this.
One other thing I wanted to touch on as far as Monday Night Raw goes, it was the continuation of the storyline between Braun Strowman and Kevin Owens. And this started before the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, with Kevin Owens trying to get the rest of the Raw roster that was in that match to kind of team up against Braun, saying he's the biggest threat. It continued with Owens right before the pay-per-view jumping off the ladder through an announce table on Braun Strowman, and then at the Money in the Bank ladder match, Strowman reversing the tables and throwing Kevin Owens off of the ladder through a table below. Well, after what seemed like a sure impending match between the two, Justin, they go the opposite route, and Braun Strowman says, I want to be friends with Kevin Owens. Let's figure out a way to be on the same page. Let's team up. So they do that, and I thought it was pretty entertaining between the two. They were able to win their match, and they defeated another odd team, if you will, Finn Balor and Baron Corbin, another face and a heel thrown together. And it basically turned out that Finn and Corbin just beat the snot out of each other and were counted out. So Owens and Strowman sort of got the default count-out victory. Made sense. Made for some entertaining stuff, but then after the match, it sort of was confusing to me, because Owens was, trying to shake hands with Braun, and all of a sudden, Braun tries chasing after him, then he flips his car over backstage. I know that we're going towards Kevin Owens and Braun Strowman having a match at Extreme Rules, and I'm fine with that, but this storytelling on Monday night didn't make a lot of sense to me. It sort of makes Braun look like a jerk for no reason. And, it's just, what was the point of all of it? Did you like it?
I was indifferent. I'm a big Kevin Owens fan, and I like Braun Strowman. I wish that he wouldn't do as much comedy with Braun as they're doing. He does pull it off well, though. So, I'll give him that. I am getting tired, though, of seeing the car flipping and stuff. That's a little too unrealistic for me to, really get behind that. But it's clearly leading to a match, and it's, Owens is going to get destroyed. I mean, the rumor is that they're going to be in a steel cage match at Extreme Rules, which is, totally fine. Braun needs something to spin his wheels with until there's a champion that's going to appear on, TV every week. And, right now, I think they're trying to figure out what to do with Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn isn't around for the next year, too.
So, ultimately, overall, pretty good Raw, in my opinion. And again, the main event, Ziggler, Rollins, even though it ended in a DQ, ultimately with Ziggler retaining, that's a match that accomplishes two things. It makes Monday Night Raw more interesting for fans to tune into this next week. Will they get another match like that, of that caliber? And it also helps sell a pay-per-view if Ziggler and Rollins have a match there for the IC title. Because when you see a match that great, but you don't get the clean finish, it wants you leaving more. And to me, that's sort of been lacking with Raw and SmackDown. You watch the shows, but what's there to sell you on the upcoming pay-per-views? That's where I thought Monday Night Raw really succeeded this past week. So ultimately, I think it's going to be remembered as one of the better Raws in recent memory. And I've already gone on record, Justin. I think Ziggler Rollins very well could be the WWE main roster match of the year to this point. So ultimately, one of the best Raws. If I were to grade it, I would say it would probably at least be an 8 out of 10.
No, I agree. I mean, we touched upon that briefly last night. I definitely think it's in the top 3. I mean, we could debate here and there, but I can't really argue with what we saw. The finish took it away a little bit. And with a match that good and that long, I just deserve an actual finish. If it was like a 7-minute match with a run-in, okay, it's Monday Night Raw, whatever. I just wanted the match that good to have a legit payoff. I think both guys deserve to have a legit payoff.
But it's also going to make you want to watch them wrestle at Extreme Rules, isn't it?
Well, I would watch those. Yeah. For me, as a wrestling fan, yeah. I would definitely want to watch it. Can they do better, or is it going to, how much better are they going? How much better can it be?
That's why you tune in to find out.
Now you're running the situation is, can it live up to that match? And then if not, then you end up in a situation where you end up disappointed.
Anything else that stood out for Monday Night Raw for you?
No, my two favorite things were the main event and, of course, the Bayley, semi-turn, possible turn. Those are what really stuck out to me.
Not Mojo Rawley and No Way Jose's exchange?
No way, Jose. Adam Rose should call the company and ask for his job back, because that's gimmick infringement. That's the same friggin' gimmick. And Mojo, I'm sorry, I can't get behind you. The only thing remotely interesting about you is that you're friends with Gronk. That's all.
Good point. Well, nonetheless, it was a very impressive Raw, very memorable one, so we had a lot of good stuff to talk about here on the Raw Recap. But even though that's an end of this segment, we got plenty more upcoming here on the other parts of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. We'll be back with the SmackDown Summary. That's coming up in just a matter of moments. It's right here on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.